So the most deluded take this week comes from Eugene Bearman, Israel Adesanya's head coach, who has said that Dricus Du Plessis must fight somebody else. He dropped the bag. He had this one, but he let it slip. You can't take these title shots for granted, so he's got to wait and fight someone else.
Completely fucking ridiculous.
So this deluded narrative broke onto the headlines yesterday, and it was across the board in the MMA community, and it had people talking, and it had a good majority of people who actually understand the sport and understand what's going on thinking, what the hell are you talking about, mate? You are way off the mark. So we're going to jump in. We're going to have a little look at this interview. We're going to break it down, debunk. Before we jump into it, if you could subscribe and share, that would be amazing. I appreciate it. I know that some people are commenting that they're not getting notifications, that they're not seeing my videos. So again, there is suppression on this platform. And when you talk about anything that's slightly spicy, they're going to come after you. So if you can share the video, like it, subscribe it, do all them things, I'd really appreciate it. Cheers. So here you have it. Bag-fumbling Dricus Du Plessis has to fight somebody else before UFC title shot. He had it and he let it slip, says Bearman. And for the majority of MMA fans, they're going to understand that this is a tactic of sorts. And we're going to kind of dig into what exactly is behind it. I have my theories. Most people will probably have their theories as well. But we'll kind of pick away at it here. This week we have Israel Adesanya. Sean Strickland has been announced. That's a very interesting fight, and obviously the camp should be concentrating on that fight. But there's something trickling away there in the background, and I guess it's Dricus Du Plessis and the fear of him. So I guess that their tactic here was to send out the narrative that Dricus is no longer the #1 contender, that the timelines aren't going to add up and he's going to have to fight somebody else. What does that actually say about Israel Adesanya, the beast, the guy who fights anyone? I mean, if you go look at my comments, I had a hysterical one yesterday. There was a guy saying that you're a hater. Anyone that says you're a hater on my channel, they're getting blocked. I can't deal with you. It's a stupid ad hominem attack that has nothing got to do with the argument that I'm usually putting forward. It's just something absolutely and utterly ridiculous. So as soon as I see the word hater, you're out of here. Get out. So apparently yesterday I was a massive hater of Izzy because all of these fights are 100% entertaining apparently, and all of these title defenses have been extraordinary. That's kind of the chivalry that we have with Israel Adesanya. So when the idea of the word fear is brought into the situation, because listen, we saw the fear in his eyes. We saw that he was hyped up. We saw that he pretended that he manifested this fight with Dricus Du Plessis. He didn't want that fight. Anybody could tell the fear was in his eyes. And the follow-up video he made after Dricus was forced to pull out of that fight, which I don't think it was ever actually on. You know, the turnaround was too soon. And of course, from the safety of his gym in New Zealand, nowhere near South Africa where Dricus was, ironically, you know, he started throwing these pejoratives over towards Dricus Du Plessis, calling him a bitch, calling him all this stuff, because he's just not championship quality that can fight through an injury. And we saw this yesterday, and we're going to look at a little bit of this interview yesterday from Eugene Bearman. We'll see that there's a deep-rooted fear amongst the camp. They do not want this fight with Dricus Du Plessis. Everything that we see blasted across social media is just that. It's social media posting. It's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is Israel Adesanya and his coaches are desperately clinging to the idea that they're Hall of Famers and they're the best middleweights of all time. And I've never seen a run of fights that have been more boring than Israel Adesanya as the middleweight champion. That's just an opinion, but it's actually a widespread opinion. And I've never seen anyone try to dodge a fight whilst talking about other people dodging fights as much as Israel Adesanya did. So yeah, let's have a little listen here.
But any disappointed that Dricus couldn't make this one?
Nah, it is what it is. He didn't want to push through his injury, so it doesn't matter to me. That's something to do with him and his team, and he has to go back and fight someone else. Very
quick one there. He has to go back and fight someone else. Where's that coming from? Is that just a little bit of a narrative that's been spun by Israel Adesanya's head coach here? I think it is. I think that Dricus Du Plessis isn't going back fighting anybody else. I can't see it happening. If we're being honest about the Sean Strickland and Israel Adesanya fight, I believe that Adesanya will put him away early. I might get surprised. With the help of God, Strickland might actually do it and quieten this guy down. But there's a little part of me that wants him to get past Strickland just as we have the Dricus Du Plessis fight and have it actually mean something with a title on the line, because I think that Dricus' style and his awkwardness is just too much. I think the power, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the ground game, everything is just too much for Israel Adesanya. I think that it would be a clean sweep for Dricus Du Plessis, especially with the amount of racial slurs and inaccurate history lessons coming from Israel Adesanya. I think it would be so sweet for Dricus to actually humble him, because he needs it really, really bad. I'd like it if Strickland did it, but I can't see it happening. And bubbling under the surface here from Israel and his coach is a really high-tempered feeling of fear. That's what it looks like to me, and to the majority of people that actually are listening to this deluded take.
Quickly, I know you mentioned at the start of the interview, Huge, that for Dricus, this was his opportunity, and you want to see him fight someone else next, right? For Dricus, when he comes back from this injury, it's not an immediate shot at Israel then.
Well, I don't make that call, but the problem is if you don't step up and take fights, you go into the pool. That's a fact. Nothing is in this sport is solid until there's something signed on the dotted line. If he's got nothing signed on the dotted line, then he's out there in the ether. He had a shot. It's the same shot that many of my boys have had who have fought for titles or have titles. You never, and went forward with horrific injuries, because you don't take that lightly.
So I'm just going to pause it there. This guy is the head coach for Israel Adesanya. Apparently, according to Chael, he's the most popular fighter in the UFC. There's so much hate out there for this guy. I really don't see it. It is a form of gaslighting when we're told that he's the biggest star that the UFC has right now. Like, Dustin Poirier is a bigger star than him, and he's a fucking douchebag as well. We have this coach of one of the biggest stars in the UFC advocating for fighters to fight injured. I guess it's a bravado thing. I guess they're built differently out there in New Zealand, where Israel is from, or China, wherever he's from. So I guess the strategy here is from Israel Adesanya and his coaches is to look at the top 10 in the middleweight division. They've tippy-toed around the majority of them. I think there's only a couple of fighters like Strickland and maybe one other person that he hasn't won an explosive 5-round split decision against, or whatever his most entertaining fights are. And look at that division and think, who has the biggest threat? So the famous line coming from every pundit and MMA fan out there is, if Israel isn't on the scene, then Robert Whittaker is the best in the world. Well, Dricus just demolished Robert Whittaker. So surely he's the biggest threat to Israel Adesanya right now. With the background of Dricus being from Africa and Israel being from New Zealand and China, and thinking that he's African, this is a big build-up. The hype behind this was going to be huge. So you're looking at them two things. You're looking at a division that Israel has cleaned out with split decisions, left, right and center in 5-rounders, tipping legs and tipping chests and things like that. You're looking at that side of it. You're looking at the background between him and Dricus, and you're saying that this isn't the fight to make next. That Dricus should go away and fight someone else because he wasn't willing to fight injured. This is a crazy take and opinion from the head coach of one of the biggest stars in the UFC, I think, for sure.
And the problem with them is they've had an injury, and yeah, it's been a bad injury. So what? You've taken your shot for granted. You think you're going to get it again, but you don't know what this machine does. You don't know the UFC. You don't know what they do. You don't know how they twist and turn things.
He's alluding to the injury being bad. We don't know what the injury is. The injury was apparently a foot injury. He must know exactly what the injury is if he's saying, listen, it was a bad injury, but you had your chance and you lost it. You don't know the machine. He's probably right when it comes to the intricacies working in the background of the UFC and the corporation in general. But again, I think it's absolutely insane. So Bearman and Adesanya are willing to fight Dricus if he's injured, with a turnaround of around 6 to 7 weeks from his last fight against Robert Whittaker, who we know would be the world champion, the best middleweight of all time if it wasn't for the unbelievable skills of Israel Arsbender Adesanya. So we know that Dricus is the guy. So you want to fight him when he's injured, but you don't want him to have a full camp. If he does that, then he's got to go back to the back of the line. So the guys here are setting up the narrative. They're spinning the delusions left, right and center in this interview, and they're putting them out there into the ether, like he said. And this deluded take will start to seep into the subconscious of these shills. And before you know it, regardless of how the Strickland and Israel Adesanya fight plays out, before you know it, we're going to have articles left, right and center like we had yesterday saying that Dricus has got to go back to the back of the queue. He's got to fight someone. He had his chance. He lost it. And all of a sudden we have this kind of mass psychosis in terms of the narrative of the Dricus and Israel fight. That's a pretty powerful thing, especially when it's been driven by mainstream fools like Ariel. And I think that Eugene knew exactly what he was doing here. He went into this interview, he spun the story, and he got it out there into the ether, as he says. And now all of a sudden we have people talking about Dricus isn't the #1 contender, apparently.
Never feel comfortable with where you are. If there's something in front of you that you've been working for your whole life, don't think for a minute that it can't just be taken away just like that.
So it's been taken away. Simple as that. It literally got taken away. So something that you wanted to achieve your whole life, this guy wants you to do it on one leg because the opportunity mightn't come around again. Forget about being #1 contender. Forget about being the biggest threat in the division. Forget about the belt going back to Africa if he actually wins. There's so much at stake here for Adesanya. I think that the fear has set in and now they're running tactics left, right and center. I wouldn't be surprised if Israel wants Strickland to win just so as that belt doesn't make its way back to the African people. Again, it's just my take. Do me a favor, let me know down below and maybe share out the video and help me out. Cheers.